Mr. Attorney General, you are acting today like the president's personal attorney. And that's the whole problem. You have a whole banner of his face hanging over the Department of Justice, and you and everybody else walks under it. And you are acting like you're his current personal attorney.
You do not belong in this job, Mr. Acting Attorney General. You should always recuse yourself from these issues because you are the president's lawyer. You are not the lawyer for the United States. Yes, you are.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in the East. Trying to make smugness great again, I guess, is his plan. That's Donald Trump's personal lawyer. I'm sorry, Donald Trump's current acting attorney general and appointee to be the country's attorney general under intense scrutiny this week as he will appear before Senate Judiciary Committee members on Wednesday for a confirmation hearing. Todd Blanche can't afford to lose even one Republican on this, or else his nomination to be the official and no longer the acting attorney general will be dead. Today, a development that further calls into question whether Todd Blanche's true allegiance is to Donald Trump, who he represented as his personal criminal defense attorney, or to the country, a question that has been looming over Todd Blanche since he joined the Trump administration. Judge Kathleen Williams ruled that Donald Trump's lawsuit against the IRS, which Todd Blanche settled in May, was brought for, quote, improper purposes. She writes, quote, the nature of the suit itself and the conduct of the parties and counsel from its filing makes plain that this was an attempt to use the court to provide some legitimacy to an agreement to confer immunity to people and entities affiliated with the president and to earmark billions of dollars from American taxpayers to redress grievances not defined in the law. On the context of that filing, the New York Times writes this, quote, the decision by the judge, Judge Williams, who sits in federal district court in Miami, did not explicitly kill the deal that Trump had worked out with his own government to receive what amounted to amnesty from IRS investigations. But the scathing ruling exposed the negotiations between Trump's personal lawyers and senior officials at the Justice Department for what she says they were backroom dealings that did not arise from a legitimate legal process. The judge, Judge Williams, ordered Rule 11 sanctions against Trump's lawyers in the case. Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general and the nominee to be the country's attorney general, is among them. Rule 11 sanctions are basically fouls or penalties imposed on lawyers when they file frivolous lawsuits and abuse the judicial process. What this means is that 2 days before Todd Blanche heads up to Capitol Hill to try to bamboozle Republicans and be confirmed as the nation's top law enforcement official, he himself is staring down rather unprecedented potential disciplinary action for being a bad faith actor in court. That is where we begin the hour with the founder of the Public Integrity Project and former special counsel in the Justice Department, Brendan Ballou. Also joining us, publisher of The Bulwark, Sarah Longwell is back, plus political analyst, former Senator Claire McCaskill joins us. Brendan, your thoughts?
I think it's a real sign of how the judiciary is thinking about the Department of Justice right now. You know, DOJ still has the same name, it still has the same building, but in terms of what it stands for, how it works, and how it's perceived by courts, it's just a radically different institution than it was 24 months ago. I think it's frankly very encouraging that Judge Williams was as aggressive as she was, both in directing Todd Blanche for potential bar sanctions, but also for the amici, the amicus brief judges who submitted a really important filing on that, and all credit to Norm Eisen and the legal team that was behind that, ordered that they can recoup their attorney's fees here, which I think really lays the foundation for judges ordering monetary fines from the Department of Justice when they act like this. So at some level, it's a very sad indictment of where the Department of Justice is. At another level, I think it's a hopeful sign of how courts are starting to reckon with the reality of where we are now and hopefully present some bit of a roadmap for what they can do in the future.
I mean, Brendan, one of the sanctions for breaking Rule 11, as you said, could be monetary. The other could be pro bono work. What if Todd Blanche is ordered to work for you?
I think that's extraordinarily unlikely. I also think we, try to be pretty selective in the lawyers that we work with and their legal skill. But I think, the issue here is, they have referred him for, potential sanction by bar committees. Candidly, bar committees are really not very active in these sorts of highly charged political disputes, so I don't think your viewers should really expect much in the way of action. Not that this isn't any shade on the bar committees, but I think they are really, really protective of their jurisdictions and don't want to be seen as political actors here. Even if nothing particular results in terms of punishments for Blanche or punishments for the other lawyers here, it really does send a message about the department's credibility at the moment. And that's something that really has a ripple effect, not just in this court, but in all courts in the United States. And I think is going to make it much harder for Blanche and the Department of Justice to do its job generally.
So, Sarah, we are so far down the rabbit hole that we're talking about the odds of confirming someone who is literally being called out for sanctions, maybe not monetary, maybe not pro bono work by a judge in Florida. That is where we are. And if this isn't the bottom, I know I've eaten these words every time I've said it. I do not know what is. You have a brilliant strategy for Democrats on, quote, torpedoing Todd Blanche's hearing. You write this, quote, when voters scroll through their social media feeds after the hearing, Democrats should ensure that they get clip after clip of Todd Blanche squirming to justify his handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. They should be reminded of the sweetheart deal Todd Blanche gave to Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, sending her to a federal facility equipped with puppies and yoga. They should be informed of the discussions Todd Blanche helped lead in the White House Situation Room, trying to figure out how little of the Epstein files to release. Todd Blanche will struggle to explain himself because much of his conduct has been inexplicable as anything other than him being absolutely willing to bend or break the law for Donald Trump, which is disqualifying for the nation's top law enforcement official. Explain.
Look, I don't know if we're going to be able to convince Republicans not to give Donald Trump what he wants, because they always do. And look, under no circumstances should Todd Blanche be confirmed by the Senate of the United States. For legal, all the ways that he has attacked the rule of law, the ways that he has already weaponized his role in the Department of Justice, like you could tick through so many reasons. But the reason I wrote the piece is that absent being able to really convince Republicans, there's an opportunity here to go on offense in the court of public opinion on something that matters to people left, right, and center. I cannot tell you how often it comes up in focus groups about frustration that the Epstein files have not yet been released, that there are still millions of troves of Epstein files that the American public, despite Congress passing a law saying that they must release them, still don't have access to. And it is Todd Blanche who has been presiding over that cover-up right down to the sweetheart deal for Ghislaine Maxwell. And this is something the American public is paying attention to. It is something they understand. It is something that they can put pressure, sort of public relations, public opinion pressure on Republican senators who do not want the whiff of the Epstein cover-up on them. And let me assure you, any senator who approves of Todd Blanche is approving a further cover-up in the Epstein saga. That is what the Senate, especially the Democrats, have an obligation to remind the American public of. And I worry sometimes Democrats can get really caught up in the weeds and the minutia of some of this other stuff. But this is the kind of thing that will really matter to Americans and may have a chance of derailing his confirmation.
And if it doesn't do that, though, it does sort of hand him back the backpack that he carried into this job. As much as Pam Bondi was the face of the PR debacle, he's the architect of the actual screw-up in terms of complying with the law, the Transparency Act that passed Congress. Let me show you what one of the ads might look like. This is an ad that you made, Sarah, for Home of the Brave.
It isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein.
Meet Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States and the guy who oversaw the release of the Epstein files. How'd that go? 2 million Epstein pages still haven't been released. And Blanche transferred Epstein's co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, to a cushy prison camp with puppies and Pilates. Oh, and now he wants to add Attorney General to his profile. This isn't a resume to award. Tell your senators don't confirm Todd Blanche.
I mean, you had me at puppies and yoga. Talk about why this works based on all your, I know now, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of focus groups, Sarah.
You know, I think one of the things that voters decided that they thought was true about Donald Trump was that he was transparent in some way. He was going to tell you all of the ways that the government was taking advantage of you. And so voters really saw him, even though they knew he lied, as a guy who tells the truth. But the one thing that comes up over and over and over again in the focus groups is confusion and anger about the fact that the Epstein files have not been released. And let's be clear, Pam Bondi got tossed out in part because Epstein was becoming a PR debacle for them. They held a meeting in the Situation Room with Todd Blanche, with the Vice President of the United States, because they were so concerned about the impact that the Epstein saga was having on Trump's presidency. Trump's own pollster, Tony Fabrizio, pointed out that when he did a series of focus groups, he found that Republican voters were still very upset about the fact that the Epstein files haven't been released. And so I think that anybody who is looking to both shine a light on the intense corruption of Todd Blanche that the American public can understand, that tags into a story that they have been following, they should focus on his role in the Epstein cover-up, which goes right down to him personally meeting and being a part of the sweetheart deal for Ghislaine Maxwell. They should bring that up over and over and over again because the American public understands it.